Here we go. I now declare that the Plano City Council is convened in open
Recording in
session
progress.
and that all council members are present. Look at this. Look at us. The council will now recess into executive session in the Children's Program Room to hold a closed executive meeting pursuant to the provisions of Vernon's Texas Codes, Annotated Government Code, Chapter 551, the Open Meetings Act, in accordance with the authority contained in Section 551.071 to consult with the attorney to receive legal advice and discuss litigation, and Section 551.087 to discuss economic development. Thank you. I now declare that the Plano City Council preliminary open meeting is reconvened in open session, that all council members are present. Our first item on the preliminary agenda is consideration and action resulting from the executive session. Our next item, Parks and Recreation Bond Referendum Presentation. Karen Rhodes Whitley, Director of Budget and Research, and Ron Smith, Director of Parks and Rec.
Good evening.
Hi,
Karen
Karen.
Rhodes Whitley, Budget Director. Tonight we're going to begin our departmental or our staff projections as far as the bond referendum. I did come before y'all 2 weeks ago, had started discussing the entire list. During that time, the City Council, that evening actually, J.C. Penney's or Toyota's giving us $15 million towards the park that we had on the referendum list. So we were able to take off $23 million for Parks and Rec projects and apply that over to public safety. So I'm going to discuss more about that in the next meeting that we have. But tonight, I'm going to have Parks and Rec go through their individual projects. It was totaling $74 million. We do have it at $51 million now. Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Council. I'm Ron Smith, your Parks and Recreation Director. Going to talk about our proposed 2025 bond referendum from Parks and Recreation. Here you see the list of projects or categories that we have identified as our priority. This list was worked through for several months to come to this number. As Karen mentioned, it was a little bit higher with some additional funding in the land acquisition area, but we're at 51.5 million. And this is what you see here is the way we have been displaying it as we've talked with our Parks Board and the Citizens Bond Committee. It's the same information on this slide here, just a little more detail, including our proposed or our anticipated operation and maintenance costs. So it's 51.595 is the number we're looking at. I'm going to go through each of these categories with you. One of them is for development of Hall Park. You're familiar with Hall Park. This is at the corner of Alma and Park Boulevard. It's a 50-acre site. 38 of those acres will be developed into a park that will have some neighborhood park elements. It will have other amenities like a trail, picnic areas, pavilion, play structures, things like that. This $10 million that we have slotted for the development of Hall Park will fund the initial phase or phases of that park. It won't do the entire development, but it will get us off to a really good start. The other 11 acres out of the 50 will be used for some very important public safety facilities that will go on that hard corner. Land acquisition, we have 20 million identified for that. 15 million of the 20 is identified for land acquisition at the Envision Oak Point location that is being worked through right now with the planning department and the landowner. There are acreage that we've already identified as part of that plan, and that 15 million is going to cover that cost. There's an additional 5 million that brings us to the 20 For other acquisitions that may come along according to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, one potential use could be land for a second senior center somewhere west of Coit Road. That would be something that we could use it for, but we don't know when these acquisitions will become available. But if we have no funding, we are not able to buy anything. So the $15 million for Envision Oak Point, an additional $5 million for land to continue building out the acquisition of our park system. Community park renovation, this category, $11,595,000. It's very specific. That funding we have identified, we presume that we would use it for the wholesale renovation of Shell Park. Shell Park is a community park. It's our largest athletic programmable site east of Highway 75. It's approximately 30 acres. It was developed over 40 years ago and is in need of a wholesale renovation, and we would think that we would use that money for community park renovation for that specific location, though, these are all proposals at this time. Park improvements, we have $5 million identified for this category. This would allow us funding to do any kind of improvements that the citizens of Plano or our city council or city leadership identify as a necessity. A good example of this is on your consent agenda tonight. There is a project to add shade at Windhaven Meadows Park in the playground area and the dog park. We're using park improvement funding that was authorized by the voters in 2021 for that. So it's a good example. The $5 million allows us over that 4-year period from 25 to 2029 to make those types of improvements throughout our system. And recreation trails, we have $5 million identified for this. This would allow us to construct new trail to build out our master plan for our trail system. There are a lot of the easy stuff has been accomplished a long time ago. We've got several gaps in our system that once we are able to bridge those gaps, the system will be that much more user-friendly and expansive. But we have to have the money available so that we can make those construction projects a reality when the opportunity presents itself. So again, $51.59 million. In comparison to some previous bonds that have been Parks and Recreation related, 2005 was $64 million, 2009 was $72 million, 2017, $91 million, and 2021, $98 million. So this gives you a good idea of where we're at for this 2025, and we recognize that there are some other important needs that we're able to address through this bond program. And with that, I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions? Casey?
A question on some of these land acquisitions and just the, for example, a senior center. Have we considered, because there's lots of places in our community that need to be revitalized, or you knew what I was going to ask, or torn down, not just building things from scratch, trying to use this as an opportunity to take some of these old buildings in our city and revitalize them, or tear something down in our city that should be torn down and use that land versus just taking some vacant land and building on that?
Yes. So if it's a city-owned facility, there would be no acquisition. But if we're buying an existing facility, we would still have to buy that and the land that it sits on. But our real estate manager, Matt Yeager, is constantly scanning the city, especially in specific general locations of the city, for existing property that's going up for sale, whether it's, most of them all have buildings on them. So we're definitely looking at that as a viable option.
I'd give a couple of examples. We've looked at Montessori schools recently. We've looked at banks recently. We've looked at a number of other areas. And what we're looking for is kind of proximity to existing facilities as well, so that it's not just kind of a completely out on its own, but we have looked at a number of facilities like that. So
We'd love something that's already got a big parking lot in place, that's got the usable square footage, something like that to repurpose would be a really, a home run for us if we can find something.
Awesome, thank you. I love that idea of not having a bunch of empty buildings sitting around in Plano.
Sure.
Shelby?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Sticking in the category of land acquisitions, for the $15 million for Envision Oak Point for LeBon Farms, are we looking at a specific area of that, or is that just holding $15 million in reserves in case we?
No, this 15 million is specific. We've already got the appraisal for the different parcels that we've identified in the plan. We don't know exactly when they're all going to be, when the transaction will occur, but that 15 million is based off of the specific plot or locations that we've identified in that plan with an appraisal attached to it. So we know if things develop as the plan is working through the planning process, what we see, we know where we're going to have parkland, where we're going to have trail, and that 15 million is pretty much right on the button.
Okay, could y'all share those maps with me?
Yeah, I think, I
Course,
mean,
one
Mark,
of
those
the
are going
things-
through the planning department's
yes, one of the things we're waiting
process.
for is the final plans to actually be developed and submitted. So we've actually been working through various iterations of that with the owner. But we're happy to share with you kind of the preliminary aspects. But again,
Yeah.
until it's filed, it's not final. And
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to see the preliminary, please.
Yep.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you, Dr. Smith, for that excellent presentation as always.
Thank you.
First of all, I appreciate that, especially given the donation, for Madomi Park that we are, making do with maybe less for parks in the bond package than has been the case in the past. But I was wondering specifically about the $5 million for unidentified land acquisitions. I know that, for example, at Los Rios and Jupiter, we were able to acquire some land that could be used for parkland, could be used for something else with a different source of funds. And, we're starting a land banking fund that obviously could buy land, and, we could later decide to use it for parkland if we wanted to. So I was just wondering, and now that I'm making it more global, I don't know if this is a question for you, Ron, or for Mark, but do we think we need $5 million for something we haven't identified yet, or are there other sources of funds that we might be able to use for an unexpected opportunity if that were to arise?
Well, first I'll answer, yes. So we do have sites in the park master plan that demonstrate, that show a potential or future acquisition. So if those properties become available, we would want to have the money to buy those. So we may have identified something, but until it comes up for sale, we can't buy it until that owner wants to sell it to us. But we want to have the funding available so when that day comes, if we only asked for money for acquisition when we knew that we had a pending sale, the Montessori school that our city manager mentioned, we were not able to be first in line because we weren't able to move fast enough. So having that money available is really a key part of building out this system.
Okay, well, thank you for that response. I really appreciate it. Well, and I guess the second part where I was going to ask the city manager, though, just about the budget and the treasury more globally. We have, I agree, we have to have money at the ready, otherwise an opportunity could arise, and we can't say, we'd love to buy that in 2029 after our next bond election. But do we have other sources of funds, in the treasury or elsewhere in the budget where we might be able to, to purchase that and then go for a bond in 2029 to kind of repay the land banking fund or whatever the case may be?
Well, we have cash flow that we could actually pay for, but the issue of waiting 4 years to be able to backfill and refill that cash flow is going to create a hole somewhere else in the budget. So the issue that we've done with the land bank is the idea that we would hold that property, and then whatever the disposition of that property becomes repays the land bank, so it's always made whole.
Right.
So the issue, I think, with going into the treasury and trying to take funds out of the treasury is a lot of those are CIP dollars, they're bond dollars that are dedicated to specific areas. So to try to take that and apply it in this way would create a hole further down the line. So I think you could do that in the short term. Long term, it becomes a much more difficult
gotcha.
position.
Well, thank you both for those responses. I appreciate it.
all right. Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, additional question along those lines. Not for you, Dr. Smith,
Okay,
but thank
thank
you. Thank you very much. You're off the hook. One of the things I'm mindful of, and we've been in this situation before, we'll issue bonds and sit on the money in case we are then able to use it. Now, I know that's not our standard practice, but given that issuing bonds doesn't happen that quickly either, even if the authorization's already been attained, if we were to have authorization for bonds without issuing them, and we could access the capital we already have from the Treasury in the event that something comes available and we have to move quickly, and then issue the bonds for which we already have authorization after the fact, so we're not just paying interest on the bonds after issuing them, hoping that something comes available. That would still require that we put out those bonds for authorization, but would give us time, not without having to wait for the next bond cycle, to be able to issue those bonds and then start backfilling that the voters would have already approved.
So I think part of what you're getting into is a little bit of our cash financing and our laddering of our maturities, and so that becomes part of the challenge as well. As y'all know, we actually invest those dollars, so it's not just cash sitting out there. There is a number of securities that we have in our treasury at any given time. So we're always happy to look at those elements, but I think it also becomes an issue, again, of the timing side of things, of when we do our issuances, which is we have on a regularly scheduled program. But to your point, Councilman, we work very hard operationally that if we've issued bonds, we try to spend that money within 3 years. And that's a best practice that we have from GFOA that our finance and our budget department try to hold us to. And we work very hard to do that. But we try to do that in order to avoid things like arbitrage and other elements of interest earnings. But the other thing that I think we have is we try not to issue debt until we know we're going to spend that money. So to your point, if we're in a 4-year cycle, we're not issuing all of that debt in year 1. We're issuing it on an annual basis. So projects that are in year 4, we will issue that debt for it in year 4. So we're a little bit more just in time along those lines. Of course.
Okay. Next item, discussion and direction on political signs at city facilities. Celso Mata. What do you got?
He's got the visuals.
You got all sorts of good stuff. Okay. Leave us waiting.
Let's see. Good evening, Council. Celso Mata, Building Inspections, here to look at our political sign ordinance, maybe some review and direction, and possible updates. So the first portion of our ordinance gives us the private property at 36 square feet. Second portion, what we're really here to really look at is any updates. The first part, we have stricken out, it was 5 signs per candidate. We stopped enforcing that early February. Number 2 is, of course, 4 square feet in size per sign. And then 8-foot setback from the property line where the signs can be located. Number 4 is the timing on when the signs can be placed and when they must be removed. And of course, the last part is our signs are prohibited in right-of-ways. So some elements to consider are, of course, the size, was the number, stacking, and the overall height. And just for visual on schematic sizes, you can see comparisons, 4 square feet, largest 36, and then getting to our visuals. This is actually the typical 18 by 24. This isn't 2 by 2, but rather 18 by 24. And as you see, stacking would be what we have seen where you put one sign on top of the other. They fit neatly inside the corrugated portion of it. And this is something that we've seen, sometimes we've seen 3 on top of each other, so that it kind of grows. But if you did the 2 foot by 2 foot vertical stack, you would have a 8 square foot total. This would be representational of a 8 square foot total, 2 foot by 2 foot. So this is your 2 foot by 2 foot sign put together. You can see the 18 by 24 visual. So how high do we go with signs is a question. Do we go with a stack? Thank you. And so, yeah, if it goes into the ground, of course, then, and you put it all the way down at the stake here, you get it all the way down to the ground, is it gonna be 5 foot? Is it gonna be, 4'6"? So that's something that we measure or could. And then if you're looking at, of course, the 24-inch by 24-inch, it's gonna be a little bit, if these were together, it's gonna be a little bit taller, you can see that. So this is actually what we have in place, in my left hand, is the 4 square foot. This would be 2 signs stacked. We see this a lot, as you can see on the visual, and that's the sign we usually see, 1 foot, I think it's 8 inches by 2 foot. So that is what we have, and open for your input. Well, I think if you look.
Let me ask you this, though.
Yes,
So
sir.
what are other comparable cities around us? What do they do? Because I feel like we're the Wild Wild West here in Plano. And
It's not just
I
us.
don't see that sign, just mass of signs all on polling places in other cities like I do here. And I guess the question for
Certainly.
Michelle would be, what's enforceable?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag of what we can do and where we end up with situations. So I think all the signs you see there in the picture and what we've got here are what everyone's using. You do see signs that are larger, and on the close to the last few days of the election, we did. And we then patrolled and we removed those signs. So we did that all day, every day for the last week or so. And that's why you saw so many different signs. It was an attempt, of course, to get the word out. And many people know they're in violation, but it's, are they gonna come get it or not? And we do, but it's just, enforcement. And so that's why you see so many different signs. And I don't think we're any different than any other city as far as signs are concerned and the amount of them. Perhaps we do see more in Plano. But I think that's just because this is where I frequent and look and observe. So it's hard to say.
So I think the direction we're asking is, do we allow stacking or do we not allow stacking of signs? Is that the bottom line? And is there a maximum height?
Right now, we're at this. This is where we are right now. This is where we are right now. But what you see is this size. This is the popular size. Obviously, there's probably cost involved, and if you look at that picture, you can tell they're all this size. But everyone could do this. They don't, but they could. And this is what we have in our ordinance.
Thank you.
So here's my comments. I have no idea, what is possible and what is not, but I would like to see less stacking and a restriction on heights as to the signs at the polling places. Anything that would help to be fair for all the candidates who are running, so we don't have a monopoly of one candidate, because they get there at 3 o'clock in the morning and take over the entire field. I don't know whether or not that could be done, but I would like to see that all candidates get a chance to be able to put their signs out there. As for heights, I don't know how you can enforce, because I've seen people who would have one sign that's not attached to the second sign, but the first sign would be all the way down to the dirt. And then the second sign would, they would just raise it a little bit. So it looks like it's stacking, but they're actually two different signs. So
Yeah,
that's
you can
stacking
see, you can
together.
see this one fitting inside this one. The wire harness didn't go all the way down. This one's taller.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
I
And
will
there's
say-
variation
Yeah,
on different signs. And you
So
can see it-
anyway,
you can
I'm
see
going
it
to
on-
finish
on the
my
screen.
statement. So that's what I would like to see, if we could work on to help sort of, even the playing field for all people who are running for an office or elected position in Plano. That's how I would like to see it.
Yes, what I'm having a problem right here is really tied to safety. If you see what's on the screen here, right next to the driveway, a vehicle coming out is going to be blocked by their vision's going to be blocked either way here. And that's due to height, but also tying them together. Well, I now have a wall where if a person's coming out of that driveway, their vision's going to be impaired. And heaven forbid if, we have an accident because we have political signs up. But that's an issue I have. So I think it's something about height, but also ganging them together where I have this wall of signs. I think there should be distinct, separate signage with a certain height limit, particularly around the driveways, that people who are in their vehicles can readily see oncoming traffic. That is outside of that, if they stack them, as long as it's not near a driveway, I'm probably okay with that.
Shelby?
I just want to better understand the problem. Is the problem you're having is your team doesn't really know how to enforce, because it feels like these signs right here could technically fall under our ordinance because they're smaller than these, but the problem is it's actually two signs, so you're not sure? Is that what we're really trying to solve tonight?
The stacking is new. That's really the only thing that we were looking at. And when you look at the two signs on top of each other, like this is called, it's within the 4 square feet. We're not having an issue with it. The only problem, which was alleviated in early February, was the 5.
Right.
And we already know about that. So that was the only thing. The signs that started getting produced, mass-produced basically, the last few days of the election were large. And so the signs were, they exceeded the size, and that was the issue, but we removed them. So that was probably the only thing that was the problem. That's enforcement, it's not allowed.
Yeah.
So if we want to set a certain, if we want to allow stacking, that's not in the ordinance right now. We don't have this as an allowance.
Okay, so it's just really for you guys to know if you want to let people stack and if we want to
Yes.
make it smaller.
Yes, that's
Okay.
probably it. Do we want to allow people to stack? And if so, how many? I wouldn't go more than 2, personal.
Yeah. Okay. Shelby?
I'll say that, like a lot of people, I find dozens or hundreds of political signs at a polling place tacky. But the only real issue I see, to echo Councilman Horn's concern, is obstruction of visibility where it matters. Not all places, not all parts of a polling location is that going to present an issue, but where it does, that matters. Now, actual, stacking of signs and connecting them, like you're holding, Dr. Smith, they're never going to actually be that tall with 2 standard size yard signs together, because those wires are going to be in the ground, and nobody's going to stack a sign like that with a tall wire like that, because the wind's just going to bow it, and it's going to be with a short wire going all the way to the ground. So like if you turn that upside down, Dr. Smith, and then pretend the wires aren't at the top, that's the, yeah, and then on the floor, that's, the white part is as high as it's actually going to go, because they're going to be using short wires. I speak from some experience here. And even that's going to present a challenge with the wind. Where you'll see it more often is with a single sign with short wires stuck all the way to the ground, and then one immediately behind it with the taller wires, so it looks stacked. And I don't know that there's a way around that, or if you would even want a way around that, other than where there are actual visibility concerns, you just say no higher than 2 feet. And whether that's one sign or 20, I don't care, as long as it's not higher than 2 feet. So there are matters of practicality, but I think the only real thing I care about is visibility where it's needed.
We do have, as a reminder, 8 feet back from the property line. And that is the setback that we have, so you can't go any farther than that. So in that picture, your visual, it looks like it's right in the driveway. It is, but when you pull up to the driveway, you've still got 8 foot out in front. So,
But that's near the road. There are certain areas of the parking lot, depending on the polling location, where that visibility can matter as well. Yeah. So anyway, those are the only things I really care about.
Yeah, I had a couple questions or comments. When we're talking about stacking, are we only talking about the same sign, one on top of the other, or could it be 2 different signs for 2 different candidates?
we don't get into content, so it could be 2 different signs, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if that is something that needs to be clarified.
No, because we don't actually look at we don't really read the sign per se in
You're
our
just
enforcement.
looking at the height. Okay, and then the other comment I just want to bring up, because it was brought to me, so I want to bring it up publicly, even though I think I know the answer. Someone had recommended or suggested that candidates agree when they fill out their city paperwork for local municipal elections to limit the number of signs, because we, as a council, agreed in 21 that we wanted to keep the signs to a limit of 5. And so asking that candidates agree to that when they fill out their paperwork. I know what the answer is going to be as to, but I want to put it on the record that I'm asking that question. Even if they are not agreeing to, they're being properly informed that this is what the city requests. Would you like to take that, Michelle?
Sure, thank you. I think we'd have a problem with First Amendment concerns. I don't think people can agree to waive their rights, or that we as government can force them to waive their rights.
Okay, but could we have them sign something saying this is the preference of the city? I believe we have a similar optional form that is signed by candidates to comply. I can't remember what the term is.
They could acknowledge the ordinance, and you could express a preference and ask them to please, as a courtesy to the city, comply.
Okay, thank you.
Just acknowledging the limit of 5. Rick, did you have a question or comment? Sorry.
Just a quick comment. First, I think on Maria's point there, I see your thing about trying to be equitable for everybody, but in my perspective, it's when you're campaigning, as we've all done, you work hard as you can, and it's, hey, like the early bird gets the worm, the first person there at 12:01 puts the sign up there, they get prime real estate. So I don't have a problem with trying to make, allowances for that. It's let the market, dictate, or the hard work of the candidate dictate. As far as the stacking, yeah, I agree. It came from over here somewhere that I think that the 2 signs should be maxed, and as Shelby said, just the 2 signs measured, that shouldn't be the height, because again, sometimes the stakes, they may have the full stake, or they may have a partial stake. So I think we need to make an allowance for that. So maybe it is a 4 foot or 5 foot or something. Rule, but I think stacking no more than 2 should be the rule. No more. I've been guilty of this, pyramids and all these kind of things. People use their imagination. But I think just 2, flat facing out signs would be fine. And then the last thing, kind of on Councilman Williams' point is, I know we have some, like in our fence ordinance and things, we have some setbacks that you can't obstruct, vision. So we might want to add something in there that if it's deemed to be an obstruction for traffic somehow, that the signs could be picked up, you know, just from a safety standpoint. So, like, even though your 8-foot setback is there, as Councilman Williams was concerned about, you might still have a little blockage of view at some point, because traffic does move rather quickly through some of these major intersections here, and I'd hate to see, you know, anything happen for that. So I think that would be left to the person, you know, on the ground, or to your staff, is if it's deemed to be a safety hazard, they can be moved. I don't know how we say that, Michelle, because that's kind of a loosey-goosey way, but just, you know, people know, use common sense. If it's blocking vision, don't put your sign there.
We do have a visibility triangle that is used when we install fences, and you have a permit for that at alleys. And we could use the same thing at a driveway at each of the libraries, and have that triangular area off limits
Right.
on the left and the right for signage. And that could be something that we could include.
Yep, that's it.
And if I might add, I think something key that you said there is that we could mark it in advance of that midnight deadline where they can go up, that this area is off limits, because folks don't want to put their sign there, you know, those cost money, and then get it removed. You know, it's better to mark out the area and say no signs here for safety, you know.
Councilman, sorry, can I ask one point of clarification? Councilman, you mentioned 2 signs, and you said with some degree, I think it's easier to have a total number, so that when they're out there with their tape measure, they're looking. And it sounds like if you wanted 2 signs like that to be able to go, that's
Well, I think
40.
to that size, because I
Correct.
wouldn't want to have 2 4x4s
Correct.
stuck on top of each other.
But knowing that there may
They
be a
would, they
slight
would be
amount
this
of
size
error.
right here, actually.
Yeah.
This is the actual larger allowance we have,
Correct.
4 square feet. That's what we see most of the time. They're cheaper. That's what you see up there. But when faced with what can I get and what's allowed, this is on the ground. These would be 2 signs. This would be allowed. This is what we have right now. Nobody's doing it, but this is what we have.
So my question is, Councilman, is that what you want, or would you rather have 2 of the other signs and
I
then
think
just?
2 is,
Yeah.
personally, I mean, that's all I ever used, was the one that Dr. Smith is holding,
Okay.
was 2 stacked on top of each other. And it worked 2 times for me, so I mean, I think that would be okay.
At what
think it would-
size, though?
I think it would be,
You want to be specific about the size, or?
I think the size, what is that standard size right there?
I think that's the 18-inch by 24, which is the second line.
Okay,
You can see up there the graphic schematic 18 by 24, and then the 24 by 24, which is this one.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
18 by
big.
24 is by far, I think, always been the most popular
Sure.
sign. And from a cost standpoint, as a candidate, it's, you can order bulk, it's pretty efficient, so.
so if you're doing that, to that point, Councilman, that's 36 inches. If you want to give a grace amount, because there may be some error between those, do you want to just say 40 inches?
Yeah.
40 inches maximum, regardless of stacking,
I,
40 inches?
I would even say maybe 4 feet, just because, you know, they might not be quite on the ground, you know, because there could be some wire.
There's gotta
you know,
be
up
some-
The
from
4 feet
ground
is
before
what
the first sign
Celso
starts.
has.
Yeah, we have 4 square foot maximum on, right now, but that's 24 by 24, which is this.
yeah, but what Celso's holding up is 4 feet high.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
which is 4 foot high.
I was just saying there would be some
That-
wire coming out of the ground and then some wire between the 2
That's,
signs.
that's where I got the 5
Or
foot
we just
max.
limit
Yeah, I
it
think
to
5.
That's where I,
Of no more than an 18 by 24 sign. but
Okay.
Done.
There you go. So
18 by 24, then I.
5 feet is pretty tall.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I wasn't wanting to go.
Taller than my
5
wife.
feet, so, but,
If you're going with that, then this goes away, and we're going with that, which is,
That's what the consensus is, but what I'm saying is 5 feet is very tall.
yeah.
I mean, 4 feet, I think I could,
Okay, Douglas Adams prescribed the ultimate answer here,
I'm being
42.
serious here. So I would still be more interested in 4 feet than 5 feet.
So then
No
we're
5 feet, but 4 feet.
the 4 foot would be, if you turn that around, that would be exactly, so that'll be the issue. It'll be, when we measure exactly 4 foot, if you hit a rock when you were putting it in and you were putting it in the ground, it's a little bit over, I mean, That's
Okay,
why
just
we
need
had
to
the
keep
5
this
foot.
simple.
It would-
Yeah.
it
Why,
would-
but
this
why do we
simple.
even want to go
Yeah.
that high, since we originally wanted to
That's
limit it
just to
to
give a little
5?
play, you know, if it's
Why don't we
exactly.
just
But those
keep it
aren't 2
to
feet tall,
18
those are
by
18 inches
24?
tall.
We've
So
thrown out,
combined,
like,
that's less than
90
48.
Right,
suggestions.
that one isn't,
Let's
that's
see,
correct.
let's see if we can wrap this up real quick. So we have, let me make sure I understand this, council. We have 2 of the 18 by 24 signs, so it's kind of an or. 2 18 by 24 signs up to 4 feet.
I would keep it even simpler and just
Simpler,
say,
yes.
no sign shall extend higher
Than 4
than
feet.
40
Or
inches.
whatever,
Than
yes.
40 inches.
Or 42 if you want to give 2 extra inches of grace. And that covers 2 signs stacked together. It covers a bunch of little
Correct.
6-inch signs, and we'll see how creative people can get. Just no sign shall extend higher than 40 or
42.
42 inches. I really don't care which. I do want to go on record saying that political signs at polling places do not win or lose
That's what
elections,
I don't.
but people get really passionate about them.
So let us work on bringing back the 42 inches as the maximum height. We will bring back also drafting that that's 48, so it would be lower than that.
This is 48 right here. This is 4 foot tall. This is 4 foot tall right here.
So we're lowering it, it will be 42, is what we're saying. So 42 inches, and we will be striking the section that we were not enforcing on the number.
I'm striking that section.
It's going to be fit the height. Fit the height. Because if you do a 12-inch sign, it's up to 42 inches regardless of the number. 42 inches is the max. I think we're there.
For all future discussions, we all need to bring tape measures.
Thanks.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks, Elso. Our next item is item 4, consent and regular agendas. Is there an item council member would like to remove?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item K.
Okay. All right, council items for discussion or action on future agendas. All right, we will take a recess and return at 7 o'clock. Thank you.